By 1560, a strange phenomenon was appearing on the global ledger. Spain was receiving record amounts of silver from the New World, yet the actual economic activity was concentrating 1,000 miles to the north, in the muddy deltas of the Low Countries. This was the Great Liquidity Migration. Spain possessed the bullion, but they lacked the logistics protocol to manage it. The Dutch, a small collection of provinces under Spanish rule, were quietly building the middleware of the global economy. They realized that in a world of surplus gold, the man who controls the shipping, the storage, and the distribution is the man who truly controls the value. They weren't looking for mines, they were looking for throughput. While Spain sat on its hoard, the Dutch were busy building the first modern supply chain, turning themselves into the indispensable middlemen of Europe. The Dutch systemic upgrade began with a technological breakthrough, the flight. Unlike the Spanish galleons, which were built for war and prestige, the flight was built for one thing: ROI. It was a standardized, high-capacity cargo vessel that could be operated by a tiny crew. It was the container ship of the 16th century. This was operating efficiency at scale. Because the flight was cheaper to build and cheaper to run, the Dutch could undercut every other shipping lane in the world. They were effectively hacking the cost of trade. By lowering the overhead of movement, they made the Spanish silver work harder for them than it did for the king in Madrid. This was the birth of logistical dominance, the realization that the rails of trade are more profitable than the cargo itself. The conflict was inevitable. Spain viewed the Netherlands as a tax farm to service their imperial debts. The Dutch viewed Spain as a systemic bottleneck. In 1568, the friction reached a breaking point, sparking the 80 Years' War. But this wasn't just a religious or political revolt. It was a corporate divorce. The Dutch realized that their logistics protocol was being held back by a bankrupt Spanish operating system. They wanted to decouple their capital from the Habsburg default cycle. By revolting, the Dutch were performing a high-stakes spin-off. They were betting that their ability to manage global trade was more valuable than the Spanish king's right to tax it. This was the first time a province didn't just fight for land, but for the right to manage its own economic infrastructure. As the war progressed, the money center moved. Amsterdam became the safe haven for European capital. Why? Because the Dutch offered something Spain couldn't: predictability. They built massive intrepids, warehouses that could hold an entire year's supply of grain or timber. This was the invention of inventory management. By stabilizing the supply of goods, they stabilized the price of money. While Spain was a victim of the price revolution and hyperinflation, the Dutch were busy financializing their warehouses. They were turning physical goods into liquid assets. The gold from Seville didn't just buy Dutch goods. It stayed in Dutch banks because the Dutch had built a better user interface for wealth. The Venetian squeeze was dead, the Spanish default was a warning, and the Dutch pivot was about to reboot the world. Ever wondered where the idea of a corporation came from? Let's take a trip back to the 1600s, the age of exploration and global trade. Back then, if you were a merchant wanting to send a ship for spices, you were taking a massive risk. Your entire fortune could sink to the bottom of the ocean with one bad storm. This made long-distance trade super risky and expensive for any single person. Then, in 1602, the Dutch came up with a game-changing idea: the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. Instead of one person funding a whole voyage, they sold shares. People could buy a small piece of the company, becoming shareholders. This spread the risk around. If a ship was lost, no single person was wiped out. But if it returned full of treasures, everyone with a share got a piece of the profit. This was the birth of the world's first multinational corporation and the first company to issue stock. It completely transformed business, paving the way for the modern economy we know today.